Hello and welcome to Get a Grip on Rebates. This is Juan Carlos Blacker. We got with us John Wilson, and we are brought to you by TCP, the craziest guys in lighting. That's tcpi.com. They've got all the lighting needs you want, and they got lots of information on rebates there. So if you're interested in lighting, go see our friends at TCP at tcpi.com. How you doing, John? What's going on in your
Oh
world?
man, I'm doing good. Been looking forward to this show today, getting the band back together, so to speak. Yeah, I've been busy, as you're probably aware.
Yeah, big change in your life, right?
It is probably second to having our first kid. Uh, you know, uh, Viewers out there who aren't trading my baseball cards on the sides, it might be news to them to hear. I left. I threw off the fuzzy handcuffs of the public sector and striking out with my own venture, Fernhill Shopworks, right here in beautiful Portland, Oregon. So yeah, man, I'm stoked. Stoked to be staying in the lighting industry. Stoked to be working with people I like working with, and it's exciting, man. Yeah.
That's wonderful news, and good to have another consultant in the group of consultants out here. I guess, call you now a competitor, but much more of a partner as always. And excited for your change, and excited to continue doing the podcast. So, hey, today I wanted to come back to a topic we talked about last year. This crime and punishment topic we had. There's been some new movement in a particular case that happened last year in California that I want to talk about, and just talk about what's happening in lighting rebates, and some of the ways that people can take advantage of them. So I think you know what I'm talking about. Just to give a quick reminder. In Southern California, we had two utilities, Southern California Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric, who were being investigated and have now and since been fined for not managing their programs well. And they're being fined quite a bit of money, $140 million to Southern California Edison, 51.6 million dollar refunds from San Diego Gas and Electric, maybe about $120 of refunds from Southern California Edison. All this because they did not manage the manufacturers and the retailers in their upstream retail lighting programs. So, and John, I've been working in upstream retail lighting for forever, so this comes close to my house. But before we get into sort of some of the details and some of the problems that happened, what do you think about utilities' ownership of program control?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a good question. Like, who bears the brunt? Who bears the responsibility, right, for this? Like, who ultimately uh, is at fault, and how does this fine, right? Like, who are we really fining here? Is it compensatory, right? I mean, is it making people whole? Uh, Listen, I kind of started on this thing down a similar path, okay? Uh, Although maybe it was a different starting point, because when I saw those numbers, I was like, 124 million, that's probably nothing. And then I looked it up, and these guys did something like 12 billion in revenue in 2019. So that's nothing. That's less than 1%. So how big a number is that? But let me circle back to that, because I'm a big fan of punitive settlements. I know it's kind of like a real oh man, I'm like going through words in my head you can't use on podcasts. Probably, I don't know. It's not like that. It's a real jerk position to be like, I'm pro punitive settlements. But here's the thing, dude. I started down this thing like kind of being like, how they should fine them more or whatever. I had this moment. My wife actually jumped in with like one of those "Who are you?" moments. Like that's how kind of leaning into this I was. So here's a little background you got to understand. And for listeners of the podcast, my wife's a criminal defense attorney, and so she sometimes just brings a different perspective to these things.
Right.
So I'm telling her about the situation, and I'm like, man, they should have fined these guys more, like 1%. That's not how punitive is that. And she kind of gives me the like, who are you? And then she opens up this question you kind of asked, who's really at fault here, right? And she starts listing all these people, and who are you penalizing? And yes, you're giving $17 back to each person prorated for programs, and you're fining them 1% of their overall revenue. But here's what it brought me to. It actually helped put me in this totally different place with it. We can all agree this was a badly managed program. Okay, it was badly managed. That's what allowed all this to happen. But even the public advocacy group that brought the lawsuit, even they stated that what allowed for this malfeasance to happen was that the utility did two things that created this perfect storm. They lowered the oversight requirements.
Right.
Ostensibly what? Ostensibly why? Why would they do that?
To make it easier
Streamline
streamline the management, right?
everything, right? And I mean, and streamline the whole thing. Aren't program implementers, contractors, aren't distributors, aren't they always saying, why is it got to be so hard?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
they're not doing it.
Let me interrupt you for a second, just to let our readers know exactly what the oversight was that they were dropping. Right, so they had dropped the oversight on the amount that they could bill, and some of these manufacturers. And some of these manufacturers who were shipping in were pretty dubious. They were splitting invoices so that the invoices would be less than the oversight maximum, right? So if you had a $2 million invoice, they'd split it into two because it was a $1 million maximum that was the oversight. Those are just fake numbers, but that's to give you an example. Ultimately, so that the manufacturers were falsifying their invoices and their shipments into the utility, to the point where there was 3 times as many bulbs purported to be shipped to retailers than could have ever been sold by those retailers. 15 million unaccounted for bulbs. I mean, this is pretty. And if you're giving anywhere between $1 to $5 per bulb, that's a huge amount of ratepayer money. So absolutely at fault in the attempt to try to streamline their programs and losing that oversight, but also at fault. And I'm always defending the utility, as you know. Also, as at fault are these dubious manufacturers who are taking advantage of loopholes or easing of restrictions in the way the program is managed. Right. So
Spot on. So these utilities, they have a responsibility in managing these public funds to maintain that oversight. However, they're trying to maintain a balance, right? It's like it doesn't have to be overly burdensome like some utilities can get there. Any public sector bureaucracy can kind of push it that way. However, you always got this voice on the other side, like lower the gate, lower the drawbridge. And that's what happened here. Okay. And there was one other thing, and this is the public advocacy group who sued them and won. They're the ones who called this out. And this is important, I think, for utility people, especially to hear, is that it wasn't just the fact that they did lower the drawbridge. It's that they also intentionally were like trying to open it up and hit these hard to reach markets. And so as I think about as a utility person, I'm like, man, we're constantly trying to figure out ways to lower the administrative burden, not completely abdicate responsibility, not jettison our like financial fiduciary responsibilities, but we are constantly looking for ways to be like, cut the administrative crap out and do it smarter and faster and more efficient for everybody. And we're also trying to hit these hard to reach markets. And so in a way, it's hard to like, then I was like, damn, why am I talking about double up on this punitive penalty on the utility? Like, yes, this was a poorly managed program, but it was a poorly managed program that outside manufacturers and their agents were knowingly and wantingly taking advantage of. And so I ultimately came full circle till I was like, man, that fine is actually That fine is actually 1% of their annual revenue, and each customer is getting back $17. That's fair. I was like, that's probably a reasonable settlement for what went on here. Who are we really blaming for this? Hopefully, it's a teachable moment. I think we can all agree.
Right. What I wasn't able to find in any of the settlement was the penalty to the manufacturers and to the retailers who were partaking in some of this malfeasance, and they have been very tight on keeping that private and not open to the public. So there's some ideas of who that might be, but I'm not sure how they're being fined. I'm sure ultimately the utilities are going to find those partners of theirs, and they will get their comeuppance, but not sure what that looks like. Anyway, a fascinating situation down there in California. Glad that the ratepayers are getting back their $17. Glad that you're getting called out on it. Sad that it had to happen this way for those programs. It definitely changed the way the programs in other parts of the country are run. The amount of backing documentation you now need to provide when you are selling to smaller retailers is a lot. I know because I help manufacturers with that. But ultimately, all for the best, and hopefully, that will create stronger controls, at least better run programs. So
Now we
yeah,
got a
that's where we're at.
drawbridge. We got a drawbridge and a portcullis guarding these utility incentives. But we don't want that, man. We want like a thoroughfare. We want like just smooth, no traffic signal in and outs. Dude, I'm
Yeah,
gonna tell you something, man. This was a fun one. This was a fun one. I'm glad we talked about this topic, and I think people care, and I hope it resonates with people because this conversation is always happening. These ebbs and flows of utility oversight requirements, and why do we have to do this? And you're right, it is sad that it happened, but I'm not surprised because when you see people trying to take a novel approach, listen, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt here. Maybe these people were just terrible at their jobs and weren't paying attention to like somebody take the wheel and then this happened. But I can also see a world where somebody's actively working to be like, listen, we need to ease the administrative burden, especially if we're trying to prioritize getting into these hard to reach markets. And then this happens and the industry learns from it. But like, we are still trying to get to those hard to reach markets. So
we are
let's not lose sight of that either. Let's not lose sight of that.
right. Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the episode for today. Any last comments there, John?
Man, I think I got something real quick. It's going to segue us to the next one because you know what? Before we wrap this episode up, we got some fan mail that I want to call out and recognize,
Oh,
and it's going to tee us up for the next podcast, the next episode we're going to do. Okay, so real
hey,
quick
bring it,
here,
bring it.
two that I copied over. I always get, they always come trickling in. We appreciate it. We're like, man, people are listening. It's amazing. Number one, friend of the show, Ryan Kruger, Premier Lighting, regular listener. Thank you. He had some fun stuff to say, but this one line I grabbed. This is in response. These are both in response to the Triggered episode. Colligan, Running Wild, Bull in a China Shop, right? This first one from Ryan. When rebates go wrong, contractors blame the utility because it's easier than telling the customer that you messed up. Your response made them back down, and that's what our industry needs. Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that vote of confidence. I'm just finding my voice, buddy. And the next one, and I'm going to keep this one anonymous, but let me tell you, it's from the halls of government, the halls. I won't even say which country. Said, I'm glad you cut it off. The sales talk was starting to sound sleazy. And this is the segue to where I want to take the next episode, all right? I think a lot of folks who work in sales, it's like you don't even realize you got the sales thing going on. But people who aren't in sales, it's like they hear it differently. It's like a frequency that hits people's brains, and like some people hear it and some people don't. So I got to thinking about that, and I got to thinking about this last question, and everybody's looking at who was to blame, and I was thinking about these comments, and we're gonna pick it up with this next topic, trunk slammers. I can't wait to talk about it. And while that's marinating in your brain, take a minute to also check out our friends, TCP, the craziest people in lighting. Check them out, tcpi.com. They got everything. They know the rebate game. They've been in it for a long time. Thanks for listening. I'm John Wilson.
Thanks, guys. Hey, I'm Juan Carlos Blocker, and we'll see you next time on Get a Grip on Rebates. Have a good one, John.